candy, and then we're going to Las Vegas. It's going to be a great evening. And I'm hungry now. But two, I think, interesting themes emerging, this notion of selflessness and how important it is for brands to be generous, right? And I don't mean generosity, and as I'm listening to Kelly, generosity in sort of the CSR way of generosity, but it is how do you put generosity at the heart of all marketing that we do, which sort of made me think of another aspect of bravery, which is bravery is non-linear. We're so used to thinking so linearly, as we think about sort of creating work, that why are you paving roads? It's a non-linear way of thinking. And which takes me to ROI, which is such an important thing. More and more, the stories we hear from brave brands and brave actions is the ROI, again, is non-linear. Because you did this doesn't mean you saw just a benefit here. Because you did something, your business actually may see a benefit in a totally non-related area. Because you've made your brand more likable, you've made your brand open doors that it hadn't done, in sort of previous ways. So I think there's just sort of interesting themes. I was told that's part of my job, by the way, is to figure out how to come up with themes. So anyway, let me introduce our second speaker today, Rebecca Duke, who's the Senior Brand Manager from Mars Wrigley Confectionery. I wish we had some pizza today and you guys had some candy right now. But she has 10 years of experience in consumer brand management and innovation strategy, and currently responsible for leading Skittles, which we'll talk about, of course, with other things. But Lifesavers, and recently also led the launch of Maltesers, my favorite candy, UK's #1 bite-sized brand. I don't know if any of you know Maltesers. If you don't, go to Fairway, which is 6 blocks up here, and they have all of that. Thank you, Rebecca, and come up on stage.
I'm very honored to be here to talk about bravery, because it's something that's very meaningful to me personally. So bravery to me means a few things. So it means doing things that make you feel uncomfortable. It means standing up for things that you believe in. And it means showing resiliency. So before I get in to talk a little bit more about Skittles, because that's what I'm going to share with you today, I also want to talk about the importance of bravery and sort of acknowledging that, role modeling that, and rewarding that in our organizations, because I think it's really critical we do that for the future generations of leaders. And so as we think, bringing it back to our teams and really showing that, what the impact of that could be, I think that's how we actually will ultimately move the industry forward. So as you mentioned, we're going to talk about Skittles. So it is going to be a little bit more of a lighthearted view on bravery, just given that it is candy. So today what I want to share with you a little bit more around is sort of the secret sauce to deliver bravery within our advertising, and then share a story about how Skittles disrupted the predictable at the Super Bowl. Sorry. Okay, so before I get into it, I will just acknowledge that I'm going to be speaking in emojis today. And one, it's to keep it simple, hopefully very memorable. And then two, it's because actually the future generations, this is how they talk to each other. So it's kind of like this or a TikTok video. I wasn't sure which one to go for. But these three things are I would say, the secret sauce I view into bravery. And I'll go into all three of them, but fire, trust, and pace. So fire. Fire is definitely my favorite because it's the most powerful. For me, fire is around the emotion that you get when you hear a brave idea. I actually get a physical reaction. So my heart starts to beat really fast. I actually feel a fire in my chest. Sometimes I get goosebumps. But the point is it creates something. It creates emotion. And it should scare you a little bit. So I don't mean terrify you, right? That's something that you definitely don't think that fits with your brand, or definitely thinks it's not the right thing to do, but it should make you feel uncomfortable. And I think the other thing that does is using that feeling or that emotion to drive whether or not you have a brave idea. It also helps you on the other side determine maybe when you shouldn't approach an idea. So for me, if I don't get that feeling, then I might say, it's a more of a mediocre or safe idea, and it helps us weed out, what's worth taking the risk on versus, moving to something else. Leaning into a brave idea is very tied to trust. So I say trust in the sense of trusting our agencies. I think, fire gets you so far, but I think with trust you need sort of that confidence to know that you have the ability, to pull it off, and that it's the right thing to do to drive business results. So trust can come in a few different ways. I think the first is within earned trust, and that kind of develops over time with your agency. That comes actually as you think about, for me, it actually starts with sort of the vulnerability that you have with your agency partner. Creating that trust to have sometimes very brutally honest conversations. And it also is sort of as you align to your business objectives and just making sure that you're on the same page about what great work looks like. But great work does not also come from blind trust, so I want to make sure I highlight the distinction. So when there is an idea, for example, that maybe one side feels the fire about and they get very excited about it, whether it's agency or client side, it causes a need to have a conversation, right? And so that's where a brutally honest conversation is really important, because you need to understand, one, if maybe it's time to walk away from an idea, or two, if it's something that maybe you can overcome the challenge on and it's worth pushing further to see how you overcome some of the critics and really move it forward. I think on this one, as we're going to get into in a second, I think the other thing that I really learned is that you have to be all in it together. So because fire creates a lot of emotion, it's one of those things that both the client and the agency side have to be completely all in, because you're going to have to sell it in internally. You're really going to have to kind of be on the line for the idea on both sides to take those kinds of risks. And then the last piece is just around pace. So I think you guys all know how fast things are moving, and I think sometimes if we don't just dive in, we could miss an important opportunity. So there's been a few times where I've experienced sometimes you just have to dive in and kind of learn as you go, and that's sort of how you can get to your bravest work. Whereas the other side of that is sometimes and you guys have probably all been in these meetings where you kind of overthink an idea so much that you kill it, or you make it so safe it's not worth pursuing. So now what I'm going to do is kind of bring these areas together of fire, trust, and pace, and tell the story about Broadway. So this year at Super Bowl, what we did was, instead of predictably creating an ad that we run in the Super Bowl, we actually created our own live Broadway musical that we ran, we offered here in New York on Super Bowl Sunday. That was a big risk, and as you can imagine, there was a lot of shock value as we were selling this idea internally in. Because this could go horribly, right? I think we could not sell tickets, people could not talk about it. There's a lot of risk to what we were pursuing. But it was something that really is a great example of how those three things come together. So if I think about it from a fire piece of mind, it really is about Broadway was something that really lit a fire within us. So it's something when we heard, we really couldn't ignore it. So I think everybody that heard it was like, we have to do this. And it scared us because it was a really big idea. And honestly, something that no one on either client or agency side had any idea how to do. We had no expertise whatsoever. So it was kind of a scary undertaking to really take on. We also, at the same time, launched, I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a video or a song within the Broadway show that we actually released prior, and it was called "Advertising Ruins Everything." So imagine selling that one in. As an advertiser, that is something that we felt was really brave to say, and we felt like we had a right to say it, because Skittles is a brand that is sort of known for doing the unexpected. It has a tonality that is very irreverent and honestly self-deprecating. And so we knew it was kind of the right area, and we felt kind of the permission from consumers to take it there. From a trust perspective, we really had to really trust and partner with DDB. I think that was a big undertaking for us. It was, as I mentioned, not something we'd ever done before. We had a lot of selling in to do internally. So kind of trusting them through every step along the way, not really knowing what was going to happen, and knowing that we had no real right to play in Broadway, and we had no idea how it was going to be accepted. And then pace. I still get like chills when I think about this, but a typical Broadway show, when you know what you're doing, takes roughly a year. From the day that this idea was sold in to Super Bowl Sunday was 6 months. I'm just gonna pause on that one. What they had to do, honestly, was bring in experts, and they had to be, on the line to make sure that they built the confidence and they could deliver this massive idea. What I would say is I think this was a huge risk, as I mentioned, to take on Broadway, but it paid off. So we talked before, not everything works out. I would say in Broadway it really did. So we were very lucky that we sold out the show, that we got 2 billion impressions, that it really did deliver business results. And I think when I think about this as an example, I'm really proud that it was successful, but I think it's more for me, what I'm really proud of is the risk that we were willing to take as an organization. And I think in this industry, when we're willing to sort of push beyond the boundaries of what's expected, I think we move the industry forward and we deliver better stories, better work, and we will deliver a better future. Thank you.